The betraying husband left her for the son of his young mistress, but he lost his mind when he saw his daughter years later. Before the story begins, comment below which city you're watching the video from. We love getting to know our viewers. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss more exciting stories. Enjoy the story and see you soon. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the kitchen, bathed in the soft light of dawn. Elena sat at the table, reading the newspaper with the concentration of someone seeking a distraction from the inner turmoil in the world outside. Next to her, Gabriel, impeccable in his white coat, fiddled with his phone, responding to messages with the kind of attention Elena hadn't felt in a long time. Their story seemed like something out of a modern-day fairy tale. Both doctors, passionate about science and life, they had built a home together that reflected their dreams. Gabriel, a renowned plastic surgeon, and Elena, a renowned neurologist, had worked hard to achieve the prestige they now enjoyed. But like everything that glitters, cracks were starting to widen. After years dedicated to their careers, the couple decided it was time to start a family. Elena's dream of becoming a mother had always been a silent foundation, and Gabriel agreed, though with some pragmatism. The first months of trying were filled with excitement, but over time they turned into doctor's appointments, exhaustive tests, and fertility treatments that tested the couple's patience and hope. At 41, Elena finally saw the pregnancy test show the 2 lines she had been hoping for. The joy was overwhelming. Tears streamed down her face as Gabriel hugged her, laughing and saying they had made it. It was a shared victory, a promise of a future full of life. However, as the months passed, things began to change. Gabriel, once so present and warm, started showing signs of impatience. During dinners, he seemed distant, lost in thought. The long conversations that had once filled their nights gave way to uncomfortable silences. Elena, immersed in doctor's appointments and the care of her pregnancy, tried to ignore the feeling that something was slipping away. The first signs of Gabriel's coldness seemed subtle. Frequent delays for appointments, vague excuses about long hours at the clinic, a distracted look when Elena talked about preparing the baby's room. Still, she preferred to believe they were just signs of fatigue or professional concerns. One evening, while Gabriel reviewed reports in the Home Office, Elena decided to approach him. Holding a cup of tea, she walked in slowly, with a hesitant smile. "You've been very busy lately. Is there something I can do to help?" she asked, trying to sound casual. Gabriel looked up from his computer, but his smile seemed automatic. "It's fine, Elena. It's just the pace of the clinic. Nothing for you to worry about." Elena felt the discomfort in his response, but she didn't press further. She simply nodded and left, leaving the tea beside him, a gesture of affection that seemed to miss its mark. As the months went by, the changes became more evident. Gabriel started spending more time away, justifying it with clinic events and work trips. He still showed enthusiasm for the progress of the pregnancy, but his words no longer carried the same emotion as before. One afternoon, while organizing the baby clothes in the small wardrobe of the freshly painted nursery, Elena picked up one of the pieces and felt tears burning in her eyes. She thought about the daughter she was carrying and wondered if she was strong enough to offer her the loving home she had always dreamed of. At that moment, something shifted within Elena. She realized that regardless of what was happening between her and Gabriel, her priority would be the child growing inside of her. In the room next door, Gabriel was speaking on the phone, laughing at something the conversation had brought up. Elena paused to listen for a moment, feeling like a stranger in what had once been her own home. The dream she had once idealized still shimmered in her mind, but now it seemed shrouded in shadows. She didn't know that at that exact moment, the foundation of her marriage was being shaken by secrets that would soon come to light. The only certainty that strengthened her was that her daughter would be her greatest reason to carry on, and no matter what happened, she would find a way to protect that love. The fresh morning breeze blew through the windows of the house, but Eleanor hardly noticed. Each week, Gabriel seemed more distant. He came home late and left early, citing clinic commitments. Elena, already in her third trimester of pregnancy, felt more and more alone. The first warning sign came during an appointment with Matteo, an emergency doctor and old friend of Elena's. They ran into each other by chance at the hospital where they both worked, and Matteo, always direct, didn't hide his concern. "Elena, have you been doing okay?" he asked as they walked down the hallway. "I'm tired, but that's expected, right?" she replied with a forced smile. Matteo hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I don't know how to say this, but I saw Gabriel the other day at a restaurant with someone, a nurse from his clinic. They looked close." Elena's heart tightened. She tried to laugh off the idea, dismissing what she had heard. "I'm sure it's nothing, Matteo. Gabriel's busy, but he loves me. He's always loved me." Matteo didn't press, but the discomfort in his gaze stayed with her. In the following days, Elena tried to push the doubt away, but Gabriel's cold gestures and glances only fueled her fear. One night, while sorting through papers in the office, Elena found something that made her stomach churn, a hotel receipt with a date that matched one of Gabriel's many busy nights. The confirmation of what Matteo had said hit her like a stone. That night, she decided to confront him. Gabriel came home late, the scent of a strange perfume lingering on him. When he entered the room, Elena was sitting with the receipt in her hands. "Where have you been, Gabriel?" she asked, her voice trembling but firm. He hesitated for a moment, enough for her to see the guilt in his eyes. "At the clinic. You know how complicated things have been lately." Elena threw the receipt on the table. Complicated enough to justify a hotel? His silence confirmed everything she feared. Gabriel sighed, rubbing his face as if trying to erase the shame that was now impossible to hide. "Elena, this wasn't how I wanted you to find out." She felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her. "So it's true. You're cheating on me." "It's not that simple," he said, trying to sound reasonable. "You have to understand. Things have changed." Gabriel began justifying his actions with arguments that cut like blades. He mentioned her age, the late pregnancy, and even the emotional distance he claimed to feel. "You've changed, Elena. You're obsessed with this pregnancy." She was speechless, shock and pain choking any response. He continued, as if convinced his words were an acceptable explanation. "Isabel is different. She makes me feel alive again, Isabel." Now the name had a face, the young nurse from the clinic, always around at social events. Elena remembered all the times she ignored the discomfort of seeing them together, how Gabriel seemed so at ease beside her. That night was a turning point. Gabriel admitted he had been involved with Isabel for months, but what shocked her most was his coldness when speaking of it. "I didn't want it to be like this, but I've made my decision. I'm going to ask for a divorce." Elena felt the weight of his declaration like a blow, but something inside her began to ignite, an instinct for survival, a silent determination. "What about our daughter?" she asked, holding back tears. Gabriel hesitated before responding. "We can reach an agreement. I'll help financially, but you know my priority now is Isabel and the child she's expecting." It was then that Elena realized how little remained of the man she had loved. The Gabriel before her was no longer the one she had dreamed of building a family with. She stood up, heartbroken, but her head held high. "I don't need you, Gabriel, and my daughter won't need you either." As she left the room, Elena knew the road ahead would be hard, but she was beginning to understand that she wasn't willing to accept anything less than what she deserved. Gabriel had no idea that his decision marked the beginning of a new chapter in Elena's life, one in which she would finally rediscover her strength. The morning felt heavy, even with the clear sky and the sun streaming through the windows of the home that Elena and Gabriel had built together. The silence between them was more deafening than any argument could have been. In the same room where, years earlier, they had laughed and planned for the future, now there was only distance and tension. Gabriel, sitting in one of the armchairs, kept his eyes fixed on his phone, avoiding looking at Elena, who stood nearby. She held a cup of tea, more as a support than out of necessity. The conversation from the night before still echoed in her mind. He had asked for a divorce, and the reason was clear. Isabel was pregnant. He was moving on. "When do you plan to leave?" Elena asked, breaking the silence. Her voice was quiet, but firm. Gabriel finally looked at her, but without the weight of guilt or remorse she expected. His expression was cold, almost as if he were a negotiator discussing terms. "I've already found another place. I'll stay until the end of the month if you agree." Elena felt anger rising within her, but she took a deep breath. Confrontation would be futile. He had already made his decision, and, as painful as it was, she knew it wasn't worth begging for someone who had already turned their back. The following week, things only got worse. Gabriel seemed absent, like a ghost in the house. He avoided interacting with Elena and made the barest effort to show any interest in the pregnancy. The household routine had become unbearable, and Elena felt like she had to make a decision. One afternoon, on her way to a prenatal checkup, she ran into Rosa, a colleague and friend who had always been her safe harbor. Sitting at a cafe near the hospital, Rosa listened silently, letting Elena vent about the betrayal, the imminent divorce, and the uncertainties of the future. "You're not alone, Elena," Rosa said firmly. "I know it feels like the end, but it's just the beginning of something new." Something new. "Rosa, I'm going to be a mother alone." And he even had the nerve to say that Isabel is better for him. "He's a coward, Elena, and you're so much stronger than he'll ever be." Rosa made an unexpected offer. There was an opening at the university where she worked in the United States. It would be an opportunity for Eleanor to start over, away from the weight of the past. "Think about it," Rosa insisted. "You and your daughter deserve something better." When Elena returned home, she found Gabriel waiting in the living room. As soon as he saw her enter, he looked up and spoke bluntly. "I've already talked to my lawyer. He'll contact you to formalize the divorce." Elena felt her heart tighten, but her anger kept her steady. "I hope you've thought carefully about how this will affect your daughter." Gabriel raised an eyebrow, as if the matter surprised him. "Of course I'll contribute financially. We can arrange visitation when she's born. I don't want this to be more complicated than it needs to be." She laughed, but the sound was bitter. "You think you can fix everything with money? Don't worry, Gabriel, I'll take care of her. And I'll make sure she grows up in an environment where selfishness and betrayal aren't the norm." Gabriel didn't respond. For the first time he seemed uncomfortable, but Elena had no time to concern herself with that. That night, as she stared at the ultrasound on her nightstand, Elena made a decision. She would accept Rosa's offer. It was the only way to close that chapter and ensure that her daughter would grow up in a place where there was love, not resentment. The break with Gabriel was final. But more important than that, Elena felt she was severing ties with the version of herself that had tolerated years of emotional neglect. The road ahead would be difficult, but now she knew she could trust her own strength. As she gently caressed her belly, she whispered softly, "We'll be fine, Clara. I promise." The rain was falling lightly over the airport as Elena, with little Clara in her arms, crossed the arrival gate. Moving to the United States was a fresh start, but it also carried an immense weight. Behind her lay the memories of a failed marriage and the judgmental looks of friends and acquaintances. Ahead of her, an uncertain future, but one filled with the possibilities of freedom. Rosa was there to welcome them. Her presence was warm, a relief amidst the emotional chaos Elena still felt. "Welcome, Elena," Rosa said, smiling as she grabbed the heavy suitcase. "This is the place where you'll start over." The first few months were difficult. Clara, still a baby, demanded constant attention. Sleepless nights were common, and Elena could barely find time for herself. During the day, she split her time between teaching and research in the university's neurology department. Rosa helped whenever she could, but the burden was overwhelming. Elena, however, refused to give in to exhaustion. Each small achievement, from publishing an article to Clara's first smile, was proof that she was on the right path. The struggle for stability. The university where Elena worked was a competitive environment, and she faced the challenge of proving her worth among other brilliant researchers. There were days when she felt invisible, but Rosa's support and her determination to give Clara the best kept her focused. One evening, as she corrected late papers at the kitchen table, Clara began to cry. Elena, exhausted, got up to rock her. Sitting in the rocking chair with her daughter in her arms, the tears finally came. "I don't know if I can do this alone," she whispered, feeling the weight of the world on her shoulders. But as she looked at Clara, something inside her shifted. Her daughter's small hand touched her face, as if she knew how much her mother needed that gesture. "For you, I can do this," Elena promised, wiping away her tears. One step at a time. As the months passed, things started to improve. Elena found a daycare for Clara, which gave her more time to focus on her research. Her work caught the attention of other professionals, and she was invited to participate in an important study on neurodegenerative diseases. It was a validation she hadn't felt in a long time. The bond between Elena and Clara also flourished. They made an excellent team. Despite the challenges, Elena made sure to create happy moments. Picnics in the park, bedtime stories, and even small celebrations for the everyday victories. Rosa, always present, had become like an aunt to Clara. "She has your eyes, Elena," Rosa said one night as they were having dinner together. "But I also see the strength you're passing on to her." Elena smiled, though she still had doubts about her role as a mother. "Sometimes I feel like I'm not doing enough." Rosa held her hand. "You're doing more than enough. You're building an entire life for the two of you." An important milestone. A year after their arrival in the United States, Elena received news that felt like a milestone in her journey. Her article on advances in the treatment of neurodegenerative diseases had been accepted for publication in one of the leading scientific journals. She felt the weight of her achievement, not just as a professional, but as a mother who had overcome adversity. That evening when she came home, Clara was already asleep, but Elena picked her up and held her for a moment. "We made it, my love," she whispered, her eyes shining. Elena knew there were still challenges ahead, but in that moment, she realized that she had rebuilt something that Gabriel could never destroy, her own strength and a home full of love for Clara. The house they lived in was small, but every corner exuded the sense of a new beginning. And although the past still haunted her from time to time, the future now seemed much more promising. For the first time in years, Elena felt in control of her own life. The image of Gabriel had become a distant shadow, and with each passing day, she felt more certain that her decision to leave him behind had been the greatest act of courage of her life. The sound of children's laughter echoed through the small apartment as Clara, now 4 years old, played with her building blocks. Elena watched her daughter with a quiet smile, sitting at the kitchen table where she reviewed a scientific article. The scene was simple, yet it carried all the meaning in the world for her. The years had passed in a blur. Clara was now a bright, curious, and energetic child, the center of Elena's small universe. Raising her alone hadn't been easy, but every obstacle overcome had helped Elena grow both as a mother and as a woman. Unexpected challenges. One day, Clara came home from school with a drawing of a family tree. She handed it to Elena excitedly, pointing to the scribbles that represented the two of them. "And where is Daddy?" Clara asked, a spark of innocent curiosity in her eyes. The question hit Elena like a blow. She had prepared for this moment, but the words still felt difficult to organize. Sitting down beside her daughter, she took a deep breath before responding. "Daddy and I decided to live in different places, my love, but that doesn't change how much I love you." Clara seemed to accept the explanation for now, but Elena knew this topic would come up again in the future. Later that night, after Clara had gone to bed, Elena stood by the window, reflecting on the choices she had made and how they would shape her daughter's world. The power of support. Rosa continued to be a constant presence in their lives. One weekend, she took Clara to the zoo, giving Elena a rare afternoon for herself. Enjoying the silence in the house, Elena sat on the couch flipping through an old photo album. There were moments from a past that now seemed like another life. Her and Gabriel on trips, celebrations, and even the first ultrasound pictures of Clara. She slammed the album shut, as if trying to lock those memories away in a distant place. Later, when Rosa returned with Clara, she noticed Elena's distant gaze. "What's wrong?" Rosa asked, sitting next to her friend. Elena hesitated before replying. "Sometimes I wonder if I made the right decision by keeping Gabriel out of Clara's life." Rosa was direct. "You did what you needed to do to protect her. If he wanted to be part of her life, he would have fought for it." Elena knew Rosa was right, but the weight of doubt still lingered. Shared achievements. Despite the emotional challenges, Elena and Clara continued to thrive together. Clara, from a young age, displayed an impressive curiosity, especially when she observed her mother working. "What's this, Mommy?" Clara asked, pointing to the graphs on Elena's papers. "These are studies on the brain, sweetie." "One day I want to learn too," Clara replied, her smile full of determination. Their relationship was built on small moments like this, where mutual admiration became visible. Elena, in turn, found in Clara the motivation to keep fighting for her dreams. Professional recognition. At work, Elena was finally beginning to reap the rewards of her dedication. Her name was now circulating among the most respected researchers in the field, and she was invited to speak at international conferences. Each achievement was a victory she shared with Clara, even though her little girl didn't yet fully understand the magnitude of what her mother was accomplishing. On one of those nights, while putting Clara to bed, Elena noticed something different. Her daughter, even while asleep, was holding a small notebook where she had scribbled something that looked like a brain. Elena chuckled softly and kissed her daughter's forehead. "You're going to be just as brilliant as I've always dreamed, my love." Overcoming the past. Even with their stable routine, the ghost of Gabriel occasionally resurfaced in thoughts or conversations. During a dinner with Rosa, Elena confessed, "Sometimes I wonder if Clara will miss something, or someone." Rosa, with her practical wisdom, replied, "What Clara has is a mother who loves her more than anything. That's worth more than any absence." In that moment, Elena realized that while the past couldn't be erased, it didn't have to define the future. As she watched Clara grow, Elena felt that together they were building something beautiful and lasting. More than mother and daughter, they were a team, a reminder that love, dedication, and courage could overcome any adversity. The world seemed full of promise, and for the first time in a long time, Elena was sure she was on the right path. The auditorium was packed, with excited voices and the clinking of wine glasses echoing through the air. Elena, now an internationally recognized neurologist, navigated through the crowd, adjusting her speaker's badge. The event was one of the most important medical conferences in Mexico, and returning to her home country after 2 decades stirred a mix of nostalgia and apprehension. Clara, now 20, had followed in her mother's footsteps and was already starting to make a name for herself in her field of research. She stood next to Elena, absorbing every detail of the event, eager to leave her own mark as a young researcher. "Mom, did you know they invited some of the biggest names in aesthetic medicine?" Clara commented, looking at the event program. Elena smiled, but inside she felt a pang of unease. Among the guests was Gabriel. She had seen his name on the list, but hadn't mentioned it to Clara. There was no avoiding the confrontation. The past was about to collide with the present. The reunion. As Clara explored the booths, Eleanor found herself surrounded by a group of old colleagues. The reunion was warm, filled with laughter and shared memories. But amidst the crowd, something caught her attention. Gabriel. He stood by a display panel, speaking with a younger man. Time had been unkind to him. His hair, now sparse and graying, and the lines etched into his face spoke of more than just the passage of years. There was a weariness, a sense of defeat that Eleanor didn't recognize in the man he once was. She tried to look away, but Gabriel saw her. He froze for a moment, then began to walk toward her. "Elena," he said, his voice faltering. She maintained her composure, lifting her head with the dignity she had learned to carry over the years. "Gabriel." The silence that followed was heavy. He seemed ready to say something, but before he could continue, Clara appeared by Eleanor's side, holding a pamphlet. "Mom, you need to see this." Clara started, but stopped when she noticed Gabriel. A moment of confusion passed in Clara's eyes, followed by recognition. Elena had always been honest with Clara about her father, but nothing could have prepared her for this encounter. "You are—" Clara began, searching for the words. Gabriel smiled hesitantly. "I'm your father." The words hung in the air, heavy and unexpected. Clara looked to Elena, seeking confirmation. "Yes, Clara, he is your father," Elena replied calmly. The conversation that couldn't be avoided. Later, away from the crowd, the 3 of them sat in a private room. Clara kept her gaze fixed on Gabriel, sizing him up. "You never tried to get to know me. Why?" Clara asked, her tone more curious than accusatory. Gabriel sighed, running a hand over his face. "I made mistakes, many mistakes. By the time I realized it, it was too late." Clara didn't back down. "Too late to write me a letter? Too late to make a phone call?" Elena watched the scene, proud of Clara's strength, but also feeling the weight of the moment. Gabriel seemed cornered, trying to justify the unjustifiable. "I thought I was doing the right thing by letting you live in peace," he said, his voice almost inaudible. Clara laughed bitterly. "Peace? It wasn't peace I felt, but absence. Don't come to me with excuses, because that doesn't erase the pain you caused. The consequences of his choices." Gabriel seemed smaller with every word Clara spoke. He tried to shift the conversation, mentioning how difficult his own life had been. He had lost his clinic due to allegations of negligence and poor management, was struggling financially, and was practically alone. Elena intervened for the first time. "Gabriel, this isn't about you. Clara isn't here to hear about your problems. She's here because she deserves answers." He nodded, defeated. "I can't change the past, Clara, but if you'll let me, I want to be part of your future." Clara shook her head, her eyes shining with a mixture of emotion and determination. "I don't think you understand how difficult this is for me, but maybe that's exactly what you need to feel." She stood up, signaling that the conversation was over. "I need to think about all of this, but don't expect too much from me." The beginning of an end. After Gabriel left, Clara and Elena sat in silence for a while. Finally, Clara spoke. "He seems so empty." Elena nodded. "The choices he made brought him here. But our choices, Clara, brought us to something much better." The young woman smiled, holding her mother's hand. "I'm grateful for everything you've done, Mom. You gave me everything I needed." And so, as the event continued around them, Elena realized that, despite the surprises life threw their way, the strength she and Clara had built together was unshakable. The conference room was filled with renowned professionals, but the atmosphere between Clara and Gabriel, sitting at a distant table, was tense. Clara had requested a second conversation, not because she wanted to resolve things, but because she felt there was still much to be said. Elena watched from a distance, unsure whether to let her daughter confront Gabriel alone or to intervene. "So, tell me the truth," Clara began, her voice firm, a tone she had inherited from her mother. "Why did you disappear?" Gabriel looked uncomfortable, fidgeting with his hands, as if searching for a way to buy himself time. I thought you'd be better off without me," he finally said, avoiding Clara's gaze. She laughed, but not in an amused way. "Better off without a father? Or were you just too busy to care?" Eleanor knew that Clara had waited years to ask these questions, and every word she spoke carried a pain that had been carefully stored away. "The burden of guilt," Gabriel sighed, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "I made bad choices, Clara. Choices I thought were the best at the time." Clara crossed her arms, her expression serious. "And how do you explain not even trying?" "My mom raised me alone, worked hard, and I never saw her complain. She never used you as an excuse, so why was it so difficult for you to even make an attempt?" Gabriel had no answers. He knew that any justification would sound empty. "I was selfish," he admitted. "I thought more about myself than about you. I thought I was freeing myself from a burden, but now I see I freed myself from the best part of my life." Clara couldn't hold back. "Burden? My mum never treated me like a burden, not for a second. You think you can just walk in now after 20 years and say you're sorry? Does that change anything?" Gabriel seemed about to respond, but Clara continued, her anger transforming into something deeper. "And I spent my life wondering what was wrong with me that you never came after me. Now I see the problem was never me, it was you." Elena decides to intervene. Seeing that the conversation was weighing heavily on Clara, Elena decided to step into the room. Her gaze met Gabriel's, and he seemed to shrink under the weight of her presence. "Clara, why don't you go take a breath? I'll handle this." Clara hesitated, but eventually agreed, leaving the room in silence. Elena sat in the chair Clara had occupied, looking directly at Gabriel. "What did you expect to accomplish here, Gabriel?" He looked older than ever, his shoulders slumped and his expression defeated. "I thought I could fix things, or at least explain myself." Elena took a deep breath, trying to control the mix of emotions rising inside her. "You can't fix anything, because what you broke can't be repaired. But if you really want to help Clara, accept that she owes you nothing." Gabriel nodded, his eyes filled with what seemed like genuine regret. "You've always been stronger than me, Eleanor. I see that now." She smiled, but without warmth. "It's not strength, Gabriel. It's love. Something you never knew how to offer." Gabriel's departure. When Clara returned, Gabriel was already standing, ready to leave. He looked at his daughter but didn't try to touch her. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but if one day you're willing, I'll be here." Clara didn't respond. She watched him leave, the sound of his footsteps echoing down the hall. When he disappeared, Clara turned to Elena, tears in her eyes. "I felt like I needed that, but it still hurts." Elena hugged her, holding her as she did when Clara was a child. It will hurt, but you faced it head on, and that's something only the strong can do. A lesson learned. Later that evening, Clara reflected on the conversation while Elena prepared tea for the two of them. "I don't think I'll ever be able to completely forgive him, Mom." Elena sat beside her, holding her hand. "You don't have to. Forgiveness is for you, not for him. You forgive when you're ready to leave the weight of it behind." Clara nodded, feeling that, even without all the answers, she had closed an important chapter in her life. And for the first time, she completely understood what her mother had sacrificed for her. Mother and daughter, united by love and strength, knew that the future was in their hands, and that no shadow from the past could ever erase that. The morning after the conference brought a sense of calm, but also reflection. Eleanor and Clara were having coffee at the hotel restaurant, exchanging few words as they processed the encounter with Gabriel. The tension seemed to finally begin to dissipate when an unexpected figure approached, a poised woman with a firm expression and confident posture. "Elena, may I join you?" she asked without waiting for a response, pulling out a chair. It was Anna, Gabriel's former business partner, someone Elena hadn't seen in over 2 decades. "Anna," Elena said, surprised. "Of course." Clara, curious, watched the interaction. Anna had a magnetic presence, and there was something in the way she looked at Elena that suggested urgency. A revealed secret. After some polite exchanges, Anna got straight to the point. "I know you met Gabriel yesterday, and I think you deserve to know the whole truth about what happened to him." Elena leaned forward, intrigued. Clara stayed silent, but she was clearly interested. "What do you mean by the whole truth?" Elena asked. Anna took a deep breath before starting. "After you left, Gabriel seemed to be at his peak. He expanded the clinic, attracted investors, and became even more ambitious. But he never knew when to stop." Inna explained how Gabriel had made risky financial decisions, neglected patients in pursuit of quick profits, and ultimately became involved in a medical negligence scandal. His once renowned clinic crumbled under the weight of lawsuits and ethical allegations. "He tried to manipulate everyone around him, even me," Anna continued. "He wanted me to take the blame for mistakes he made. When I refused, he threatened me." Clara was stunned. "He did that? Even after everything he had already lost?" she asked, incredulous. Anna nodded. "Gabriel never knew how to handle failure. He destroyed himself and everyone around him. Today, what you saw is what's left of him. A bitter, lonely man." Clara and Elena's reflections. After Anna left, Elena and Clara sat in silence, processing everything they had just heard. "That explains a lot," Clara finally said. "He hasn't changed, has he? He's still the same person who put his own ego above everything else." Elena agreed, but there was something deeper in her gaze. "What he chose to be was never our responsibility, Clara, but that doesn't mean we have to carry the weight of his choices." Clara grew thoughtful. "Part of me feels sorry for him, but the other part knows he had every chance to do things differently." Eleanor smiled, proud of her daughter's maturity. An internal confrontation. Later that day, Clara decided to walk around the city by herself, while Elena stayed at the hotel. Sitting on the hotel room balcony, Elena watched the street's activity and reflected on everything she had heard. Despite Anna's revelations, she didn't feel relief or satisfaction. Gabriel's failure was something he had built, but Eleanor knew that deep down there was still a wound that needed healing. When Clara returned, they talked for hours, sharing feelings they had both kept to themselves. "I always thought that if I ever found my father, it would change something in me," Clara said. "But now I see that he never had the power to define me." Elena took her daughter's hand. "He doesn't define who you are, Clara, and he doesn't define who I am. We define ourselves by the choices we make, and those choices have brought us here. A new purpose. The next morning, before heading to the airport, Elena received a message from Anna, thanking her for listening and offering support if they needed anything. Elena responded with gratitude, but also with the certainty that this chapter was truly closed. As Clara and Elena boarded the plane back to the United States, they knew they had faced and overcome a ghost from the past. Life went on, and both were ready for the next step, together as always. Elena looked out the airplane window as it took off, feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time: peace. The return to the United States brought with it a sense of renewal. The encounter with Gabriel and Anna's revelations had left deep marks on both Clara and Elena, but it had also brought an unexpected clarity. It was as if, by confronting the past, they had made room for something new. One afternoon, while Clara was reviewing an article in her room, Elena entered with a cup of tea. Her expression was serene, but Clara noticed something different. "Is everything okay, Mom?" Clara asked, closing her laptop. Elena sat down beside her, sighing before answering. "Yes, everything's fine. I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened in Mexico, about Gabriel, about us." Clara looked at her attentively. "And what have you decided?" Elena smiled slightly, setting the cup down on the table. "That forgiveness isn't about him. It's about us." An unexpected letter. A few days later, Elena found a letter in the mailbox. It was from Gabriel. He thanked her for the conversation with Clara and mentioned that he was seeking help to deal with his mistakes. The words were humble, almost desperate. "I know I can't go back in time, but I want to do something to make up for what I can, even if it's too late." Elena read the letter several times before showing it to Clara. "What do you think of this?" Clara asked, handing the paper back. "I think he's trying, but I don't know if it's for himself or out of guilt." Clara nodded, but her expression softened. "Maybe it doesn't matter. Sometimes trying is already something." An act of empathy. Clara decided to respond to the letter. In her reply, she was direct but not cruel. "I don't expect anything from you, but I hope you find a way to forgive yourself. The past can't be changed, but that doesn't mean you can't try to be better from here on." Elena was surprised by the gesture. "You really don't hold any grudges, do you?" she asked, impressed by her daughter's maturity. Clara smiled. "Grudges are an unnecessary weight. I'd rather spend my energy on things that matter." Rebuilding the present. After the exchange of letters, Gabriel kept in sporadic contact with Clara, sending updates about his attempts to rebuild his life. He was still a broken man, but now it seemed he was searching for a sense of purpose. Clara didn't get deeply involved, keeping a healthy distance, but her act of empathy had planted a seed of change. Elena, in turn, felt freer than ever. The years of effort to protect Clara and rebuild their life had finally borne fruit, and she could look to the future with optimism. A significant celebration. A few months later, Clara presented her first major study at a neuroscience conference. Elena, sitting in the audience, felt her heart swell with pride as she watched her daughter walk confidently to the stage. Clara began her presentation with a sentence that made Elena smile. "This work is dedicated to the person who showed me that love and courage can overcome any adversity, my mother." When the presentation ended, mother and daughter embraced, while colleagues and researchers congratulated them. In that moment, Elena realized that all the sacrifices, all the difficult nights, had been worth it. A cycle comes full circle. As they headed home that night, Elena reflected on how Clara's empathy toward Gabriel had served as a reminder that, even amid pain, there is always room for growth and overcoming. Although total forgiveness might never come, Clara's gesture had closed a chapter of hurt and given both of them the freedom to look toward the future without the shadows of the past. Elena, sitting in the living room with Clara by her side, felt something rare and precious, complete happiness. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Elena's house, bathing the room in a golden light. Clara was in the kitchen, making coffee while talking to her mother about a new job offer she had received. "They want me to collaborate on a project in Germany, focused on neuroplasticity. It's an incredible opportunity, Mom." Elena listened with a smile, feeling a mixture of pride and a bittersweet sense of anticipated longing. Clara had become everything she had always dreamed: independent, brilliant, and determined. "You should go, Clara. This is your moment to build something of your own," Elena responded, holding her daughter's hand across the table. Clara smiled, though her eyes betrayed a hint of reluctance. "I know, but you'll always be my biggest inspiration, Mom." Closing the past. Later that day, while sorting through some papers, Eleanor came across an old photograph. It was from a moment she had almost forgotten, she and Gabriel, still young, smiling in front of the first house they had bought. The contrast between that image and everything they had lived through was painful, but instead of sadness, Elena felt gratitude. That journey had transformed her. Later, during a walk in the park, Elena reflected on the years that had passed. The breakup with Gabriel, the sacrifices she had made for Clara, and most importantly, the personal growth she had achieved. The woman she was now was much stronger and more complete than the young woman who had started that path. A moment of reconciliation. Back at the house, Clara mentioned that she had received another letter from Gabriel. "He wants to meet with me before I leave," Clara said, watching her mother's reaction. Elena nodded without hesitation. "If you think you should, then do it. You'll always know what's best for you." A few days later, Clara met Gabriel at a cafe. He seemed more at ease, perhaps for the first time. They talked about his new life, his projects, and how she had become an extraordinary person, despite his absence. "You're the best thing I never knew how to appreciate," Gabriel confessed. Clara listened but didn't respond directly. Instead, she stood up, gave him a firm handshake and said, "I hope you continue trying to be better." The future of Clara and Elena. When Clara left for Germany, Elena accompanied her to the airport. The embrace between them was long and filled with emotion. "I'm so proud of you, my love," Elena said, holding back tears. "Everything I am, I owe to you, Mom," Clara replied with a smile full of love. Elena returned home, where the silence seemed louder than ever. However, instead of feeling lonely, she felt a deep sense of peace. Clara was living her life, and Elena, in turn, was free to explore new possibilities. A new chapter for Elena. In the following months, Elena threw herself into new projects, traveling to conferences and collaborating with colleagues around the world. Her passion for science continued to guide her, but now there was an additional element, the satisfaction of having created a legacy through her daughter. One night, as she looked at the stars from the balcony, Elena felt a wave of gratitude. She hadn't just survived what had seemed unbearable, she had thrived. The future was an open field, and Elena knew that every choice, every challenge she had overcome had brought her to this point, and with a quiet smile she whispered to herself, "We're okay, Clara. We always will be." The cycle was complete, and Elena knew that the love, strength, and resilience that had sustained her journey would continue to light her way wherever it took her. And so ends the emotional journey of Elena and Clara, a story of strength, resilience, and choices that shape our future. If you were also moved by this narrative of resilience and love, don't forget to leave a like on this video. It helps us reach more people with inspiring stories like this. Subscribe to the channel to follow more transformative stories and, of course, hit the bell so you don't miss any updates. Now, we want to hear your opinion. Do you think Clara made the right choice by giving Gabriel a second chance to talk? If you were in her shoes, would you have done the same, or would you have left the past behind in a different way? Write your answer in the comments. We love reading your perspectives. Share this video with someone who could use a dose of inspiration today. See you in the next video.